Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. This is Courtney, the Marketing Coordinator here at AIM. Today's webinar will be recorded and later posted on our website. This does mean that all attendees will be automatically muted so that we can get a quality recording. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box and we'll try to answer them throughout the presentation. But if we're unable to get to all the questions, we'll have a member of our marketing team reach out to you individually to make sure we get those answered. Our newest agent resource, the 2-Minute Minute, is in full swing. Our marketing team is bringing you quick ways to talk to more prospects, write more business, and grow your agency. We're posting new videos every week, so go ahead and check out our social media pages, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube to see what you might have missed. We do have webinars every Wednesday morning, so keep an eye on your email for the next invite coming your way. It'll be about our short-term care product lineup with Mike Anderson. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Derek so that we can get started today. Go ahead and take it away, Derek.
Perfect. Thank you, Courtney, as always. Well done. As Courtney said, this is Derek Lape here with American Independent Marketing, and today we are going to be talking about Worksite LTC and some of the different solutions we have for you guys who are looking to either jump into that market or you might already kind of be looking around working it. And basically, what we're going to be covering here in about the next 30 minutes or so is really what's going on with today's Worksite. Things for what's new, what's kind of changing, how you can help different size groups, and even groups that are probably smaller than you think of for some of those really small employers out there that may only have 5 employees, as well as kind of some things to look forward to and how to position yourself for what's coming forward in the future. On that note, we'll touch a little bit about some of the different state legislatures, considering long-term care payroll taxes and how to kind of position yourself for that when you're talking to an employer. And then after all of that, we're going to kind of make sure, you're ready when an opportunity presents itself, because this is definitely going to be something you want to have in your arsenal as far as long-term care is considered. So with that, we'll kind of just go ahead and jump right in to what some of the advantages are and why a business really should consider getting this, as well as yourself as the agent, right? One of the nice things is, instead of having this talk repeatedly 25 times over with, 1 or 2 people, husband and wife or just one person, and going through the long-term care talk and going through all that work and, quoting each person individually, which is going to take a lot more time and a lot more effort on your part. It's a lot easier to get in front of a group of, say, 25 or 50 employees and just, give that pitch one time and just kind of have them all fall in line and go through with what they're doing as far as, submitting applications and getting some business on your books. It's definitely a lot more efficient as far as you're considered on the agent side, because like I said, you're in front of a big group. You're only having to give the speech once. Yes, you're still going to have follow-up questions probably from a lot of them, but it just kind of cuts down on the time, as well as making things a little bit easier on your end. As far as how this helps employees and groups, right? It's really going to be advantageous to both the employees and the employers. And I'll get into that a little bit more here later on, but it's really going to benefit both of them. And then a lot of people think, Worksite Advantage has to be bigger bigger companies with a lot of employees to be able to get that. Honestly, we have some different solutions that we're going to go through here that are going to meet, as far as down as 5 employees, and that go much higher. And like I said, we'll get into those discounts here in a few minutes, but it's basically going to be a very flexible option for different employers, and there's some really good benefits that are going to kick in, not just for the employees, but for the employers themselves. So a lot of people, are always talking about protecting, an individual's American dream. But it's a little bit nicer to actually be able to do that as an employer, right? And in the US, there's going to be some definite tax laws that make it beneficial for the employer to offer some kind of worksite LTC. And it's going to be very beneficial as far as protecting those employees' investments, what they're putting into their 401ks. That way they're not going to have to take it out, as well as the employer, right? Because a lot of places now are matching different things, paying into it, right? So it's going to reduce the tax burden on the employer. And let's be real, right? Everyone's talking about how hard it is to find employees, and then once they get them, it's even harder to retain them. So a lot of companies are starting to offer different things like long-term care, like different life insurance policies, right? Things that are not going to be super expensive, when you're considering, all right, we're going to go in here and we're going to give everybody pay raises all the time and they can just go out and buy their own stuff, because there are going to be some other advantages for the company as well by offering these plans. But it's something that is just going to help draw in more employees and keep them there, right? Because these are a lot of things that most Americans see as a need, or at least a want, um, but they don't want to go out there and spend their money on it. And if there's a way to give them a little bit of a discount, they're going to be a lot more likely to do that, right? So it's going to make it easier for you to sell. It's going to make the employees themselves happier, and it's going to benefit the employer as far as retention and drawing in some good talent. Now, we touched a tiny bit on taxes, right? So really, how is this going to benefit the employer? Um, so there's a couple things to remember here, right? One of which is you don't necessarily have to be the tax expert in the room, right? You just need to know that there is going to be some tax benefits if the employer is paying into a group long-term care plan for its employees, right? If they start trying to get into the weeds and details past that super far, um, that's the point where you either hopefully are networking, right, with some kind of accountant that you can ask some questions with, or you could just refer them to the accountant, or say, do you have an accountant that you can follow up with on this stuff? And also, depending on the group size that you're talking about for the employer, there's probably going to be a department, right, in their office or in their business that's going to understand how different tax deductions work, and they'll be able to get through that process themselves, or they're probably already working with an accountant, right? Because business taxes can get a little bit more complicated, and a lot of places don't do that by themselves. Some do, right? But a lot don't. So that's going to be something to kind of help yourself if you're like, what, I don't know taxes well enough to talk about this. You don't really have to. As far as kind of getting that message across, right? One of the things you can do is ask them, do you want to reduce what you pay in taxes as the employer? Okay. And to be honest, most people don't want to pay more taxes, right? Whether it's to your state, to the federal government, whether it's as an individual or a business, we're all paying quite a bit of taxes. And anywhere we can lower those, most people are going to jump on board. It's going to be, it shouldn't be shocking, but it kind of is how easy it is to get kind of employers to get interested when you just ask that question, right? Also, another way to phrase it right would be, would you rather be paying Uncle Sam or taxes, or rewarding your employees, right? Because there are going to be tax benefits, like I said. So instead of taking that money and just giving it to the state or giving it to the federal government or wherever all those taxes are going, they could be taking that same money and putting it into some kind of worksite long-term care plan that's going to benefit their employees, that's going to keep their employees happier, that's going to keep them around, and it's also going to help protect, some of their investments and financial standing. And hopefully, when they're better, they can get back to work a little bit easier, right? They'll be in a better financial situation. So it really is a win-win for everybody, which is really nice. And something that happened here in Washington State that some of you may or may not be familiar with, right, was kind of the Washington Cares Fund. So it's a Washington Long-Term Care Trust. It's been a little bit messy, to put it nicely, but it taught us quite a few things that are pretty important, right? One of them is how quickly carriers can pull out of the market, right? How fast sales can stop and kind of what happens on the tail end, even if they're coming in just to try and get out of the tax. So that's kind of the high level of that. It did surprise some people when they were looking at it, right? But it really shouldn't have, because when you're thinking about it, whenever the market's going to be flooded with something like a long-term care state tax in any state, right? There's going to be a lot of people that are trying to jump into it. And right now there's about 12 different states talking about, implementing some kind of long-term care tax. They're all in different stages. I'm not going to list them all out, but you can definitely give us a call. Two that are the furthest along are going to be California and New York. And you've probably seen some news on it, heard some different things. But it's a good thing to keep in the back of your mind if you are licensed in those states or reside in those states, and maybe you're not in long-term care yet, because there's going to be a lot of business coming, and there's going to be some different kind of things to talk about with each state that I'm not going to get into here, because it's going to be a lot more state specific. But it's something that if you're curious about it, definitely give us a call here in the office and we can talk about it. A few things that really surprised me, but like I said, probably shouldn't have looking back now, is just how badly people or employers don't want to pay more taxes. There was literally times where I had clients, because I was still just an agent and financial advisor at the time this was going on here in Washington. They would call in, they'd only be working for about another 5 years, and it was going to cost them about double or triple the amount to get a long-term care traditional. But they wanted to do it because they just didn't want to give any more money to the state. So there's going to be a lot of people that see, just that they don't want to pay into it. There's going to be people where it's very advantageous for them to get out of taxes and stuff like that, as well as, get a better return on what they're actually getting as far as benefits by getting their own long-term care. And this is a nice way for employers to be able to offer it to their employees, especially in those states, to get them kind of ready for it. I believe I heard Costco has already done this down in California. So, I mean, there's a lot of businesses in California. There's a lot of places you can talk to. And kind of like we talked about, as far as return on your investment or your time, it's going to be a lot easier to get a lot more people when you're giving one talk to a big group. We also kind of saw, as far as employers here, they were really willing to spend a little bit money as far as getting long-term care worksite plans versus letting kind of DES, which is the Department of Enterprise Services here, get involved in their payroll operation. Because what happened is we gave a once lifetime opt-out. Anybody who didn't, those taxes are going to be start going through on their W-2s. It's already happened, but it's just more places where kind of our local government's going to be involved in taxes on the W-2. It's going to take more time to make sure everything's checking out with them and doing everything right. So it's also going to be more expenses just on that end as far as the upkeep. It's a little bit easier if you can just send them, hey, they opted out, right? So there's a few different things there to kind of keep in mind as far as when you're talking about this with the employers, right? And as I mentioned a little bit, one of the things I learned about is even if people are just coming there to get out of the tax, right? Some people are doing it because they were on the fence about long-term care, and now there's another reason for them to get it besides them just saying it's a need, right? And those are going to be more traditional things you're seeing, but there's going to be a lot of people coming in, getting hybrids, different things that are just trying to get out of the tax. The nice thing is there's going to be a huge, potential for follow-up as far as upselling, pivoting to different things, because I had a lot of clients calling in and they were upset with their current advisors or agents because they had no idea what was going on with the state tax. And they moved over a lot of their other stuff because in their mind, you're staying more up to date on current events, you know what's going on, right? You were able to take care of them in a time of need, which goes a long way with the client. So it's definitely a good thing to stay up on in your state. But also, you're really going to be looking at, like I said, this is going to be a win-win for the employee and the employer. Okay. As far as getting more incentivizing for either the employer and the employees to kind of buy into it, right? The employees are going to get a one-time like short window at reduced underwriting options, and we'll get more into that in a second because it's going to vary a little bit based off of what carrier it is. But also the employers are going to be getting tax deductions, right? So like we talked about, this isn't just money that's going to taxes, right, to the state or whoever. It's actually going to be funneled back into their own business, taking care of their own employees, right? So it's really something that kind of sells itself. It's a pretty easy sell. As far as once you're in front of them, the one thing you're going to have to do is get in front of them, right? But from there, it kind of just sells itself. Um, as far as the different plans, and a lot of people, mainly agents, are going to be a little bit concerned about there's no inflation on this, what's going on. You're really going to learn that a lot of people aren't as concerned about inflation anymore as they used to be. Part of that's just kind of the change in the industry where, it's not the golden days of, hey, we offer 5% inflation for lifetime on everything, right? A lot of people are going to 3% at, 10 or 20 years, or they're front loading benefits to get them a higher amount that normally it would take 20 years to grow to, but it's going to be cheaper, right? So it's not as big of deal, especially in those states where they're coming out with those long-term care taxes. Um, so it's a really good thing. And then also, kind of like I mentioned, with going back to those pivots and different things, you're not just looking like you're the expert in the area. You're not bringing all this to their attention of what's going on, right? Um, but you're also going to be kind of giving them some more awareness of long-term care and why it matters, right? So there's going to be a chance that, yeah, they have maybe one of these smaller plans through work, but they really do want to come look at a hybrid or a traditional for themselves. So there's going to be a lot of different options moving forward, right? And with that, let's kind of dive into some of those options that we have to offer for you guys. So starting off is Life Secure. They are going to be the one pure, true worksite option, right? That's going to have a simplified issue. And with simplified, it's not guaranteed, obviously, but there is only 7 questions, which when you compare that to the 20 plus, number of questions on a normal traditional long-term care app, 7's pretty slim, right? It's pretty easy to get people through. So that's going to be a big benefit as far as employees who actually want to get some long-term care. And it's really nice that the employer is able to offer their employees a really good solution that more of their workers are actually going to be able to get long-term care coverage versus just going out and finding their own plan. Um, Basically, it's going to be simplified issue for the employees for the entire 30-day enrollment period, which is going to be really good. That's where I was kind of talking about that short period a slide or two ago. And some of the other benefits you're going to get, right, are you're going to get unisex rates, and this is going to be for both the employees and the spouses of the employees. So you're really not going to find a better deal as far as rates, because that unisex rate, especially on a female, spouse, let's say, it can save them around 30%. So it's going to be a lot less expensive than going out and just getting an individual plan through a carrier, right? So that's going to be another big selling point, right? Look what we can save your employees, right? Who are looking for this, and right, it's going to be a big one. They do have some requirements, and we're going to get a little bit more into them too. But some of the big ones are going to be basically like you see here, right? The census. You're going to have a minimum 50-50 male-female ratio, right, for the workers, for the employees. If it's not 50-50, it has to be leaning more towards the male side. Obviously, right, males are usually cheaper when it comes to long-term care, and they're giving that unisex rate, so they don't want to have 80% females in there because it's not going to be as advantageous as far as their risk is concerned. So that's a big number to remember, right? 50-50 or more so leaning towards the males as far as the ratio. Um, Also, and the nice thing about these is they keep it pretty simple. A lot of the numbers are going to be the same, right? It has to be 50% of their employees have to have a salary of at least 40K. Okay. So that 50%, pretty easy, right? 50-50 male, female, 50% of employees must earn 40K or more. So this will kind of become easier as you talk about it more, but luckily a lot of the numbers are pretty simple and they keep them the same for a lot of things. Um, when you're working with groups under 100 employees, okay, the employer is going to have to contribute $25 per employee. If you're working with a group over 100 employees, it would be voluntary to the employer. They don't have to pay anything. Um, but what you're going to see is the employer a lot of times still does either pay, a piece of that $25 or they'll pay the whole thing, right? Part of that is because they're doing this to help retain employees, make them happy. So they're covering some of it, or because they get more tax deductions if they do pay it, right? And that's one of those kind of selling benefits, like we talked about, for the employer themselves is like, hey, look, you get some tax advantages and you get to take care of your employees, right? That win-win. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. Like I said, if it's over 100, they don't have to pay it. If it's under $100, they do have to pay the $25 per employee. So right here we have an actual just kind of snippet from basically what they're saying that you have to have. I'm going to let you look over these details a little bit as I talk about some of them. But the key points on this one are going to be obviously 18 to 30 is going to be age banded. 31 to 69 is going to be individual ages. It's all going to be unisex rates like we talked about. It does touch on the 10 to 99, so under 100 employees, right, versus over, what they're going to have to pay. Um, and then the other kind of most important thing to consider, right, and like I said, a lot of these numbers are going to be the same, but what you're looking at is going to be 10, right? You're going to want to keep that in your mind, the number 10, because the minimum requirement for group size is they have to submit at least 10 apps together, right, to be able to get this. It doesn't matter if they have only 10 employees. It doesn't matter if they have 200 employees, right? You have to submit at least 10 applications, right, to be able to get all these nice benefits, the simplified issue, those really big discounts. So when you're talking to these groups, if you're looking for this true worksite plan, they're going to have at least 10 people. Now, if they're under 10 people, there's going to be some more options that we can get into, but we'll do that in a few more minutes from now. This is another little picture of basically what the benefit bank looks like and what options are available. Okay. The nice thing about them, and by them I mean LifeSecure, sorry, is there's a few different options they can choose from, and each employee gets to choose from it, right? It's not just going to be like, hey, we're all stuck in this. So they get a little bit more flexibility there as far as options. Something else to note on this, obviously, like you're probably used to already as an agent, is you always want to look for the little asterisks, right? It may not be available for every option in every state. These are all different things that if you want the materials, whether it's hard copy, PDF, let us know. We can get them sent out to you and you can review them. Or like I said, if you have questions, give us a call and we can run through it with you, right? The other kind of selling point for LifeSecure for employers is they might be like, you know what, that sounds awesome, but I don't really want to tie someone up, doing all these applications, taking all this time to go through it, explaining it, doing different things like that, right? Which is valid, right? But the good thing with LifeSecure is all these applications are going to be completed and filled out entirely by the employee or the spouse themselves, right? So there's actually going to be less paperwork as far as getting all this going. And maybe it's a nice employer that's like, hey, I'll give you guys 30 minutes, to get this done at work today, or right, they can do it on their own time. They can go home and fill it out and make sure everything gets done. So it's not going to really put any more burden or things to track on the employer. And if you're in one of those states where a long-term care tax is coming, it's actually going to save them some time because, like we talked about a few minutes ago, they're able to just say, hey, they opted out, right? They don't have to make sure the W-2s are right. They don't have to figure out more taxes. They don't have to go through more information with the state and make sure everything's, the way it's supposed to be, right? It's just a lot easier to say, hey, they opted out, right? So this is going to be our true worksite LTC plan, right? We're going to start jumping into some of those other options, like I said, for under 10 employees. They're going to be more of what I like to call a modified, right, long-term care worksite. Not going to be this true simplified, but they're going to have a few less kind of requirements as far as what they need. And part of this too is, like I told you guys, there's an option for basically every employer out there, right? First up is going to be Mutual of Omaha, big name, everybody knows who they are. Still going to be similar selling points, a little bit different. But on this side, basically, it's going to be one of those things where you're trying to retain employees or offer more benefits than maybe another employer out there so they don't, get stolen or take that job in the first place. And employees like receiving discounts. Like I said, a lot of people out there are wanting to get these different plans, but they don't want to go out and buy them, from a carrier because it's just too expensive. So even a small discount could be enough for them to be like, oh yeah, I really like that. That's awesome. I want to do it. With this one, Mutual of Omaha, like I said, very few requirements, right? It's easy to get the discount. And right, a lot of these numbers like you're seeing are going to be the same. The carriers like to keep it easy. So for this case, 5 is going to kind of be that magical number you want to keep in your head when it comes to Mutual of Omaha as far as getting the employee discount, right? Have to have 5 employees for apps and you get a 5% discount, right? Those 5 employee apps have to be submitted all at the same time. And we'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute. But just, the magic number is 5, right? 5 employees with apps, 5% discount. Right here, you can look at a little bit more of the specifics. This is verbatim from Mutual. It's right from the product guide. We also have those available in PDF or hard copies if you guys want them. So just let us know. So like we talked about, the easiest way to kind of remember what's going on with Mutual is 5. So there has to be 5 employee applications to start. And those 5 apps have to be submitted at the same time. You can't do 2 or 3 now and the other 3 or 2 in a week or 2, right? It all has to come through at the same time. So that way they're going to get that discount. And if you do have any questions on that, or if some are taking a little bit longer, right, give us a call, right? We have a new business department that can make sure everything's in order, everything's going correctly, everything gets submitted right, because we're here to make it easier for you guys, right? That's what we do. And then also, another really nice thing about that 5%, it also applies to spouses, right? So it's not going to be just the employees, it's also going to be their spouses. So it's going to help when they're getting those traditional LTCs, right? It's just another perk of, hey, I work for Bob's Organic Fruit Growing Company and I get a 5% discount, right? And it's going to be for my spouse too. So it's just different things that kind of have more perks, and it makes it a little bit nicer about staying with a certain employer. Like we talked about, everybody loves discounts. Nobody loves paying taxes, right? Pretty simple on that side. So this is going to kind of be your common employer discount. It's not going to be that true simplified issued, super easy, but it's going to be something that's going to be still attractive to both employers and employees. As far as another option, kind of in the same boat, is going to be National Guardian Life, or NGL. Still going to be 5, but it's going to be a little bit different. So there's going to be a 5% discount, right? But it's not going to be just the number of apps that are submitted. It's going to be the number of apps that are actually going to be issued, okay? And we'll get into kind of the specifics here right, with this next slide. But magic number is still 5, right? 5% discount. And we're going to want to look at actually what issues versus what's going to be kind of submitted as far as apps. A lot of this information is going to look pretty similar to mutuals. There's going to be a few differences, so they still have to have at least 5 employees, right? But the big kind of difference, as I was touching on here, is there has to be a minimum number issued. And as you can kind of see in that minimum participation, right, is 2 to 5 issued employees varying by state. So there's going to be some state variation on that one on how many have to actually issue. They still have to have at least 5 employees, right, who are going to submit those apps and be working there. But the number that actually have to issue may not be all 5. So that's kind of a cool little workaround for the company and the employer, but it's going to vary by state. So if you're curious about your specific state, go ahead and ask us when we do our follow-up calls after this, or feel free to call in or shoot in an email, and we can let you know exactly what those requirements are for your state, because they are going to vary a little bit, from state to state. But basically, you're looking at kind of the same thing, right? Just another incentive to be able to give your employees as an employer. It's a pretty easy sell for the company. The only real hard thing is going to be getting in front of employers, which isn't as hard as it used to be, because more and more companies are offering this, and the ones who aren't are seeing a lot of their employees go to those other companies, or they're having a harder time hiring people. So it's just a really good way to incentivize, workers to stay or come work with you, as well as get some nice tax advantages, depending on kind of what route they take here. As far as key takeaways, right? We talked a little bit, and we're going to kind of go back to that state long-term care tax. If you're in one of those 12 states, and you can do a Google search, and there's lists all over about who's talking about it, especially if you're in California and New York, sooner's a lot better than later, because like I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of places that are going to pull out, right, once the kind of rush hits. But even if they don't shut down, there's going to be a lot of slowdowns, okay? So it's going to take longer for you to get your contract and get in there, right? You're going to be already a little bit behind the game. And then if you wait a little bit longer and then you try and go in there and say, hey, I need a contract now, it's going to take a lot longer for that to get through than it's going to, today, tomorrow, this week, right? Because everyone's going to be trying to jump on that bandwagon, right? Because there is a lot of business to be made in the States doing that. And they're just going to see the numbers of what's being sold, and they're going to want to jump on that bandwagon. So it's a little bit better to be a little bit proactive and kind of get that out of the way if it's something you're thinking about doing. As far as, the other side of slowdowns, a lot of states just give a window, right? So for here in Washington, what we did was, hey, we passed this law. You got a few months to go out and get your own plan for a once lifetime opt out, right? Has to qualify, meet these requirements, but it has to issue in that time frame, right? It has to be good and ready to go. So with a lot of these carriers getting overwhelmed and slowing down, it became a big issue, and that's part of the reason they were pulling out, because they knew there was no way they were going to be able to get all these things issued in time. So it's a good idea to start having those talks with employers, employees, a little bit sooner, because yes, we don't know 100% if it's going to happen, right? It's politics. Things change all the time. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen. We don't know exactly what the opt-out's going to look like, right? A lot of the states that are talking about it now are looking about taking away the opt-out period. So if you didn't have something in place before the law passes, you're not going to be able to opt out. So there is a lot of gray area still, but it's something that your clients are probably going to want to hear about. And if they don't, they're not going to be too happy. It's just doing your due diligence, as an agent or advisor, making sure they're aware of what's going on, letting them know there are options, right? And this is how it would benefit them if they were to choose it, okay? So if you want to know a little bit more about kind of how to have that talk, once again, get us on the phone, because, there's some different strategies to that, and making sure you're still in compliance with your state. Also, like I talked about, right? We have a ton of different options from traditional, right, through Mutual, National Guardian Life, Thrivent, as well as a lot of different hybrids, One America, Gillico, um, Mutual has some, right? So there's going to be a lot of different options you can get into. But right now is kind of the time to not only jump into, right, worksite long-term care, because like I said, it's a lot more efficient with your time and getting in front of big groups. It's a lot more kind of easy to sell because it's benefiting the employer and the employee. And normally, if you get the employer to buy in, they're going to let you pitch it to the employees, right? And a lot of times that'll be a group meeting or a Skype meeting or something where you're going to have a big group of people right there listening. So it makes it pretty easy versus going out calling leads, doing whatever you're doing individually. Um, but it's also a really good time to get into hybrids, to get into traditional, because a lot of these states, like most things, right, when it comes to the government, if they see one state that does something and it appears to be beneficial for that state, like in Washington, right, a lot of the other places are going to start jumping in, right? Usually California, Oregon, we all kind of mirror each other. Then you start jumping to the East Coast, and then it starts spreading, kind of like wildfire. So it's something to really get up on if you're not. But there's going to be a lot of opportunity right there, right? And even if that state never passes that law, right, people are still buying long-term care. They're still buying hybrids. It's still a very big need. They're still seeing what's going on with their parents or their grandparents right now who went through needing long-term care, but they didn't have any kind of coverage for it, and kind of how much that really bankrupted them and took away their savings. Or on the flip side, they saw their parents or grandparents who had long-term care coverage and how much it helped out, and they see it as a need. So it's really kind of a great time to get into it, and we can go ahead and jump into all that. We're going to be giving you guys all follow-up calls, right? But really, that's kind of the key takeaway, right? Really easy to sell as far as worksite. Just got to get in front of somebody. Benefits everybody. It's a win-win. There's tax advantages. It makes employees happy, right? Gives them great rates. It's really easy to sell, right? So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody who took the time to be here today. Greatly appreciate it. Like I said, we will be giving you follow-up calls. So if you do have any specific questions, because I do see a few on there, we'll be following up with you guys. And then if you get a little antsy and you don't want to wait, feel free to give us a call in the office. Phone number's right there in the middle, 800-672-7202. And I just want to say thanks again and look forward to talking to all you guys.